Okay, everyone, a brief update on Don Lemon's criminal case. Now, just one new filing this week. It was the government's opposition to several motions filed by the defendants for disclosure of grand jury materials. Now, grand jury proceedings are conducted in secret to protect the identities of witnesses and to prevent them from being intimidated or potentially influenced through inducements. Now, the image that comes to mind is of prosecutions to break up organized crime. Now, well-documented history there of defendants trying to stop indictments from being handed down by eliminating or influencing witnesses. Now, in this case, the government has made a concerted effort to protect the names and locations of witnesses, all of whom are churchgoers who were subjected to a takeover-style attack of City's Church in Minneapolis. Now, they were chased out of the church during a worship service and berated for not giving up their lives and protesting alongside the activists outside the federal building in Minneapolis every day, according to one of the activists, the notorious William Kelly, aka Da Woke Farmer. Now, he literally berated the churchgoers for not giving up their lives to become anti-ICE activists. Now, here he is.
Fake Christian, why are you not standing with your Somali and Latino communities? Why do I not see you out at Whipple every day protesting this attack on humanity? Where are
So, blaming churchgoers who have no control over U.S. immigration policy. Now, they can't do anything about it. So, the court itself agreed that there's a great need to protect the witness names and locations in this case. By granting the government's request for a protective order last week, that's what the court has said for all intents and purposes. Now, the churchgoers already have been doxxed and harassed. Now, what else could happen as the case moves forward? We've watched the behavior of the anti-ICE activists on video. The government doesn't want their activism going to the next step, as it were. Now, there's also a presumption of regularity in matters occurring before the grand jury. The presumption is that there was no misconduct. The defendants want the grand jury transcript, so they need to overcome the presumption. Now, they say that the indictment and superseding indictment were obtained through misconduct. They allege misstatements of law occurred. They allege that the U.S. attorney lied to the grand jury, lied about what the law is, and lied about what the defendants did. So, those aren't the most sophisticated legal arguments that could have been made. However, as I mentioned in a previous video, the legal arguments of the defense aren't just directed toward the court, per se, but toward the court of public opinion. It's a high-profile case, and die-hard anti-ICE activists are galvanized by that type of rhetoric. So the defense filings in the case, just like the actions of the defendants themselves, which were captured on video, are not typical, in my view. The defendants' behavior appears unlawful and socially unacceptable to us, and guess what? They reject our values as well. They reject our social norms. So there's that level of societal critique going on if we buy their arguments. If we don't, it's just crime. Crime seeking out an audience willing to be gaslighted. Now on to the government's latest opposition to the numerous motions for disclosure of grand jury transcripts. Now 3 such motions were filed by defendants. The government responded with oppositions already, but filed a new opposition this week, probably because the court issued a last call and said, any oppositions need to be filed by this week. Now, after reading the government's oppositions, unless I'm mistaken, the government is anticipating that the court might grant the defendants' motions in part. Now, the government takes aim at each motion filed by the defendants in turn. First, Don Lemon and Georgia Fort filed a motion saying that allegedly inflammatory rhetoric from President Trump and DOJ officials, including Pam Bondi, indicate that the prosecution is political in nature, and as a result, there was probably misconduct before the grand jury as well, lying and so forth. Now, the government's opposition says, however, hooey, you're attributing the statements of high-ranking officials to the line prosecutors who presented before the grand jury. You have no proof of their misconduct. Next. Now, Shane Bollman filed a motion. He's a journalist as well. He sought to distinguish himself from Don Lemon by saying Shane Bollman has his mouth closed in all of the photos and videos captured of him at the church. He was just quietly recording the goings-on. And the indictment allegedly doesn't state facts specific to Bollman, but just groups him in with the rabble. And that's not enough to indict him specifically, Bollman says. The government's opposition says, hooey, you're talking about the substance of the allegations against you. Just file a motion to dismiss if you think the indictment is legally insufficient as to Defendant Bollman. And finally, 33 of the 38 defendants filed their motion for grand jury disclosures together in a joint motion. They say that the KKK Act and FACE Act are misused and not applicable to the defendant's conduct here. The government's opposition says, hooey, your arguments are directed toward the legal sufficiency of the indictments. Now, those arguments belong in a motion to dismiss, not a motion for grand jury disclosures. Just file your motion to dismiss. Now, the government's latest opposition also reveals that if after the defendants file their motions to dismiss, and if the defendants are successful in whole or in part in getting some of the counts dismissed, the government intends to seek new indictments or superseding indictments alleging violations of different code sections, namely conspiracy to intimidate federal officer from discharging duties under 18 U.S. Code, Section 372, and obstruction of religious services under Section 247, subsection A, subsection 2. So I'll stay tuned and report back here after the court rules. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, leave a like and don't forget to subscribe.